Have you ever stood at a crossroads where one sentence could shatter a tyrant's throne? Stay with me, because the women of Karbala did exactly that, and their voices still echo across 13 centuries. Lady Zaynab bint Ali stepped onto the blood-stained plain of Karbala just after midday on the 10th of Muharram, 680 AD. The sun was still fierce, the sand still red with the martyrdom of her brother Imam Hussein and his 72 companions. Spears glittered like a wall around the survivors' camp, but Zaynab's eyes did not drop. In that single, unchanging moment, she made a silent promise. I will turn this battlefield of grief into a pulpit of truth. Minutes earlier, Hussein's final cry had faded beneath a storm of hooves. Soldiers tore the banner of the Prophet's family from its pole, yet the real standard, Zaynab's unbreakable spirit, remained upright. At first the enemy jeered, expecting the women to crumble, but instead they saw Zaynab gather the orphans close, calm her trembling nephews, and step forward as if the day itself now answered to her. The tension ladder had begun. Grief, shock, resolve, then rising courage. But let's climb down a rung and ask, who was this woman whom history would later call the Mother of Revolution? Zaynab was the granddaughter of the Prophet Muhammad, raised in a home where justice was breathed like air. She learned eloquence at Fatima's knee and valor in Ali's courtyard. Even in childhood, she practiced memorizing revelation. In adolescence, she spoke to crowds in the mosque of Kufa. In marriage, she nursed the wounded of Siffin. Her life had schooled her for the furnace of Karbala, yet nothing could dull the pain she felt as the companions fell. Ali Akbar, Qasim, Habib, even her own sons Aoun and Muhammad. Every death turned the screw of tension tighter. Have you ever felt grief so sharp it stole your breath, yet still had to stand and guide others? That was the burden Zaynab carried as the afternoon shadows lengthened. She saw the tents blazing, heard the crack of burning rope, smelled wool and palm fiber turning to ash. In those flames, the women of Karbala, Kulthum, Ruqayya, Fatima al-Sugra, and the loyal maidens like Fiza, linked arms so no child would be lost in the chaos. Their shrieks rose, then broke into a pattern interrupt silence when Zaynab's voice cut through. Hold to one another. God is our helper. The sudden calm stunned even the soldiers. Before we dive deeper into the night march of captives, let me explain how these women shaped the very narrative of Islamic resilience. Men could lift swords, but after Ashura, only women could lift the story. And stories outlive swords. When the enemy chained the household and marched them toward Kufa, they intended humiliation. Instead, they gave Zaynab a moving minbar. Every dusty mile became a verse of protest, every marketplace a new audience. Now you might be wondering, how could speeches defeat spears? Listen, upon reaching Kufa, crowds gathered, some curious, some complicit. Zaynab, still in torn garments, rose in the governor's courtyard. With a voice that sounded uncannily like her father Ali's, she asked a question that froze the onlookers. People of Kufa, do you know whose blood stains your soil? At once she listed name by name the martyrs they had abandoned. Habib ibn Madahir, Zuhair ibn Qayn, the flower of youth Ali Akbar, the infant Ali Asghar. Shame rippled through the crowd. Hardened men wept. Women tore their veils in remorse. A bridge statement followed. But here is the twist. Though their bodies are gone, their message is alive, and you must answer it. Thus, a slave caravan became a movement. Travel further with me to Damascus. Chains rattled against stone as the captives entered Yazid's ornate palace. Imagine the contrast. Marble columns, perfumed air, water trickling in fountains, and in the center a caliph lounging on a golden throne. He expected broken spirits. Instead, he met Zaynab's unflinching stare. In that throne room, she delivered the most famous pattern interrupt of early Islamic history. Yazid recited a poem of triumph. Zaynab replied, "Praise belongs to God who honored us with his prophet and purified us from impurity. You, Yazid, may scheme as you wish, but you will never erase our memory." Her words cracked like a whip and the court gasped. Let's pause and climb another rung of tension. Yazid's pride wounded, the caliph ordered a public sermon mocking Hussein. Up stepped an orator spewing slander while soldiers forced Damascus to listen. Suddenly, a slim teenager, pale from sickness, rose. Imam Zainul Abidin, Hussein's surviving son. His voice trembled at first, then steadied. Whoever knows me, knows me. Whoever does not, let me tell you who I am. He traced his lineage to the prophet in breathtaking detail. The audience, spellbound, begged him to preach from the pulpit. Yazid dared not refuse. Resilience passed from aunt to nephew like a torch. Side by side with Zaynab, other women found their voices. Kulthum, Zaynab's sister, addressed the people of Damascus in piercing lament, describing the hunger, the thirst, the severed heads carried on spears. 4-year-old Ruqayya, yearning for her father Hussein, asked for his return every night until grief took her life in a Syrian dungeon. Her tiny grave still draws pilgrims who swear they feel an inexplicable mercy there. Each story is a fresh rung on the ladder: sorrow, empathy, awakening. Have you noticed how a single question can open a locked heart? Zaynab mastered this. In every speech she asked her listeners, "Where will you hide from conscience?" The question lodged in minds long after her caravan departed. Traders whispered it in markets. Scribes inked it in letters that raced across the caliphate. Poets wove it into elegies that the authorities could never fully silence. Emotional transportation deepened the lesson. To grasp it, close your eyes and smell the damp prison where the captives spent winter nights. Hear metal cuffs grinding bone. Feel the coarse weave of Syrian wool against skin burned by desert sun. Now feel Zaynab rise in that darkness to recite midnight prayers. Her whispered Quran verses rolling like a river through despair. Imagine how the younger girls, half asleep, clung to her recitation the way a sailor clings to a mast in a storm. That is why her legacy endures, not merely in speeches, but in unseen nights of steadfast worship. But here's the twist. Zaynab's resilience outlived the Umayyad throne. Within a generation of Karbala, revolts erupted in Kufa and Medina bearing Hussein's banner. Poets like Kumait and Al-Farazdak risked execution to praise the Al-Bayt. Jurists codified mourning in law, and every Ashura the streets filled with processions. Behind each wave of memory echoed Zaynab's first courtroom defiance, engaging question time. What would you have done if you had witnessed Karbala firsthand? Would fear have sealed your lips, or would love have opened them? This is not ancient history alone. It is a mirror. Whenever any community confronts injustice, the path of Zaynab shines. Stand, speak, bear truth with dignity. Before we bring the strands together, let's rewind to an earlier scene often overlooked, the night of the 8th of Muharram. Water had been cut for 2 days. Children whimpered. Zaynab moved from tent to tent, soothing them, promising heavenly rivers. Near dawn, she found her nephew Qasim writing his farewell on a scrap of cloth. She knelt, pressed the note to her lips, and said, "Courage, child. The page you write tonight will be read until the end of days." In that soft cradle of words, a boy's fear dissolved into resolve. Spoken by a woman, it armed him better than iron. Minute by minute, the day of Ashura unfolded. Pre-dawn prayer, single combats, midday heat, the fall of each hero, Hussein's final stand, and the brutal charge that ended his earthly life. Through those hours, Zaynab watched, recording everything in the tablet of her heart. Scholars later said that had she not survived, most details of Karbala would have perished. The historians Abu Miknaf, al-Baladuri, and later al-Tabari relied on chains of narration that trace back to her. Resilience became reportage. Resilience became collective memory. Legacy did not sleep in the graveyard of Damascus. Years later, when pilgrims reached Medina, they found Zaynab's simple house a hive of activity. Mothers came seeking lessons in Quran. Orphans came for food. Poets came for facts. She narrated with precision, but never with bitterness. "We were tested," she would say, "and God found us patient." Her words cooled anger yet stoked purpose, like a blacksmith balancing flame and water to forge steel. As centuries passed, women across cultures drew on Zaynab's archetype. In Iran, captive Safavid princesses invoked her when pleading for justice. In India, female scholars recited her khutbah to inspire anti-colonial activism. In Nigeria, processions led by women chant her name. Each time oppression rises, her shadow stands taller than tyrants' palaces. Now let's descend the tension ladder toward resolution. Yazid's dynasty fell within a mere 65 years, toppled by the very waves of conscience Zaynab stirred. The Umayyad palaces lie in ruins, but every year Ashura marches grow louder. Children memorize her sermon, filmmakers adapt her life, refugees whisper her story in camps. The climax of injustice passed. The resolution, heritage of resistance, continues. So what is the takeaway? Zaynab and the women of Karbala taught the world that resilience is not the absence of pain. It is the refusal to let pain silence truth. They proved that leadership is not crowned on a battlefield. It is anointed in the quiet decision to stand when standing seems impossible. Have you ever wondered how your single voice might ripple beyond your lifetime? Remember Zaynab. She had no army, yet she shook an empire. She had no weapon, yet her words cut chains. She began the journey as a grieving sister. She ended it as history's steadfast guardian of justice. And that brings us to our final step. Close your eyes and picture the plain of Karbala today. Black banners fluttering, pilgrims walking barefoot, mothers telling their children the names of every martyr. In the hush before dawn, a reciter echoes Zaynab's sermon and the crowd answers in tears. This is not mere ritual. It is a living dialogue between past and present, between her voice and ours. The story ends, but the call continues. Speak when truth is chained. Stand when fear commands you to sit. Carry light from the ashes of any battlefield. Because somewhere a child waits to hear that courage is possible. That is the legacy of Zaynab and the women of Karbala. Their voices rose from grief to greatness, and they invite each of us to do the same.